Alright, so these are not new stories, these are classics. You've probably heard them narrated before by other narrators, and to be honest, you've probably heard them narrated much better. This video is just for the people who want to hear my interpretation of these stories. There will be timestamps in the description if you want to skip a certain story in the case that you've heard it before. I moved to my dad's when I was 10, and I didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with, a single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple of years. We weren't close, but we ended up having the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be home alone because my friend's mom was at work. Her mom had been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found that her sister was in a mental institution and was less out recently. The night Rob was hanging out with my friends, they get a knock at the door. My friend thought that it was just their mom, she knocks a certain way when coming in, and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's schedule. She came in. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in the bathtub. She even hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. About a year ago, my final semester in college, I worked at a department store in the mall. I didn't have a car yet, so I asked for day shifts because it was a 2-hour bus ride back home. So basically, if I had a closing shift, I'd get done at 11 but not get home till 1 AM. But sometimes I would be given closing shifts, much to my annoyance, since I had a 6:45 AM class and my mother tends to worry because who wants their kid on public transport that late? Sometimes she could come and get me, but it would be too much of a hassle to get my younger sisters out that late and such, so I never asked her. My managers, being the jerks that they were, gave me a week of closing shifts, knowing my situation. I was pissed, but whatever. One night, I just finished my shift, got on a bus, I sat in the back, and was minding my business when my iPod died. I was annoyed, but I just kept my earbuds in and occupied myself by playing a crossword on my phone. About 2 seats behind me, I hear these guys speaking Spanish. Now my stepmother is Puerto Rican, so while I understand a fair bit of Spanish, I don't speak it. So I hear them talking but don't pay attention, because it's rude to eavesdrop. Until they say, "That black girl up there," then my ears perk up. I keep my earbuds in so that they think I can't hear them, and I continue listening. What they're saying is horrific. To paraphrase, they knew my stop, second to last one before the bus gets back to the terminal, and while my stop is at the front of my neighborhood, it's got no street lights, and at this time of night it's empty. And, to put it simply, we're planning on quote-unquote snatching that piece of ass up. I was about 20 minutes away from my house, so I knew I had to act quickly. Since I knew they could see me, I mean they were 2 seats behind me, but across, if that makes sense. I pretended to play on my phone, oblivious, while I was actually texting my mom. "Mom, can you please meet me at the bus stop?" 5 minutes go by, no answer. We're getting closer to my stop, so I decide to call her cell. No answer. I call the house phone, and she finally answers. It's about 12:30 a.m., so she was asleep. I tried to talk as cheerily and calmly as I can. This was our conversation. "Hey Mom, did you get my text?" No. What's up?" "Oh, I sent you a picture of these jeans I'm gonna order online when I get home. I really need your opinion, so I really need you to look since the sale ends at 1 a.m. She gets the hint that I need her to look at her cell, and so I say goodbye and hope for the best. We get to my stop, and I see my mom's car. I snatch my shit up and hightail it off the bus. I don't even look behind me to see if they're following me. I just jump in the car and tell my mom to go. I look in the rear view, and I see the guy staring at the car. The next morning I called my job and told them I quit. No more public transport for me. Thanks to my stepmom for teaching me Spanish, and thanks to my mom for guessing the hints. I'm 22, and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was in the process of moving in. The door that led into my apartment locked itself automatically when closed. So I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail while using the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. He didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm gonna go take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, jumped out of my window, my apartment's on the first floor, and called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a tin and tired looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives, waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in the mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. I have always had an innate fear of the night. Not so much the dark, but the night itself. As a child, my imagination was overcome with stories of creatures that come alive at night, and the safety offered by a house and light. I never had anything to base this fear on until a night when I decided to go with a buddy of mine to a baseball game, and got stuck at a light at 2 a.m. after dropping him off at home. Of course, that night, the game went into extra innings, and so I didn't get a chance to drop my friend off back at home until well after 1 a.m. Everything was fine on the way home until I hit a red light before the street that led to my house. It was a T-junction and I was turning left. The light is one of those that you think is broken until it finally just turns green right when you finally decide to run it. Of course, I pulled up just as the light turned red. I would have just run the light, seeing as no one was there and it was closing in on 2 a.m. on a school night, But earlier that week, I heard the phrase, "Character is what you do when no one's looking." And for whatever reason, I decided that night to prove to myself that I was a man of character. Big mistake. I pulled to a stop at the light, feeling good about myself, bordering on self-righteous, when I happened to look out my window to my left, and noticed a lady sitting all alone on a bus bench. We made brief eye contact and I quickly looked away. It was too late. I could see movement out of my peripheral vision and knew she was coming my way. I looked out the window and noticed that she was carrying a bag. I quickly checked that my doors were locked and all my windows were up. I then moved my right foot above the accelerator just in case and braced myself for what was to come. I was hoping it would just be an awkward exchange and was praying for a quick light change before she reached me so I could just get out of there. She walked right up to my window, put down her bag and began to tap on the window. I nervously looked up at her and she motioned for me to pull my window down. I had automatic windows, so I just imagined pushing too hard on the window button and that thing just coming off all the way down. So I took a deep breath and lightly flicked it with my finger. The window moved microscopically down, but she did not seem to notice or care. She then leaned in and began to talk. "My boyfriend beat me up. I have a friend who lives down the street. Can you give me a ride?" I should stop and give a brief physical description of the bag lady. She was small and skinny and of indeterminate age. She was either in her mid-20s and had lived a hard 20 plus years on the street, or she was a 60-something-year-old who lived a moderately hard life on the street. All that to say, just by looking at her, there was no way to verify her story. She looked beat up by life, not just by a boyfriend. But there was something about her delivery. It was robotic and seemed practiced, and like she was disconnected from the moment. That made my skin crawl. After a second of debating on whether I should do it, I told her that I had to get home and could not give her a ride. After my first refusal, she leaned in closer and said the same thing again. "My boyfriend beat me up. I have a friend who lives down the street. Can you give me a ride?" This time, I felt more confident when I declined to give her a ride, and told her I had a curfew and had to get home. She leaned in a third time and began her statement again. "My boyfriend beat me up." At this point, the light changed. I slowly lifted my foot off the brake and started slowly rolling forward and began muttering an apology. She didn't move. She just looked at the light, then looked down at me, leaned in closer, and said 5 words that have haunted me ever since. "You made the right decision." Then she picked up her bag and walked back towards the bench. I peeled out of the intersection and cried and screamed all the way home. I have no idea what she planned to do, or if there were people waiting to jump in my car from the bushes had I moved to let her in. But that encounter has haunted me ever since, and has confirmed in my mind that nothing good ever happens after dark. In the mid-80s, my mom was a cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural wine regions. We live near both. She would leave business cards at the local shops and got most of her business this way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day, she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking Mum to clean her old farmhouse. She made a lot of odd demands, and Mum would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet Mum and said that she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mum agreed, mainly because the lady was obviously wealthy and was offering to pay Mum substantially more than she would reasonably expect. My mom went to the house on a Monday morning and said she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Mum was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She wanted to leave immediately, but had 2 more rooms to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing, or perhaps something had fallen and it wasn't the door at all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mum got closer, she realized the photos were all of her. Some were taken at her family home, and many others were taken at other houses Mum would clean, some through windows or over fences. She used a house phone to call the police and immediately drive to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated, but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped with researching, and we ended up moving to a new town 4 months later. I recently moved into a big house, just temporarily. It's kind of a complicated situation. The house belongs to a family member. They're going to be gone for a few months, that sort of thing. I was going to be there on my own, so obviously I thought, what if it's haunted? There wasn't anything in the house when I moved in, there is now. I was in the main hallway unpacking some stuff when the doorbell rang. That put me on edge right away, because the house is at the end of a long drive and kind of out of the way. You have to go looking for it to find it. There was an old woman at the door, or sort of old, it was kind of hard to tell. This was in broad daylight, but there was still something kind of off about her. She was really tall, like a full head taller than me, and there was something weird about the way she looked. It was like none of her clothes even fit her properly. She shook my hand and smiled really wide, and told me that she was from the neighborhood council or something, and asked if she could come in and talk to me. My gut reaction was to say no, but I couldn't really think of a reason to. She was just an old woman. What was she going to do? I really wish I had just slammed the door in her face. I brought her into the living room, and she sort of tottered behind me, like her feet didn't fit her shoes properly. She sat down without asking and grinned at me until I took a seat across from her. For about half a minute, she didn't say anything, just smiled and stared at me, while I got increasingly awkward. Just as I was about to break the silence, she fished into her pocket and pulled out this really big old-fashioned sweet, the type that comes in see-through wrapping. "Here," she said, "eat this." I should probably point out here that she spoke really quietly, so it was difficult to hear anything that she said. I accepted the sweet, kind of taken aback, and unwrapped it. It was dark red, almost black. I popped it in my mouth because she was still grinning at me and nodding her head. Have you ever walked around behind the supermarket where they keep the big bins? They throw meat that's gone off in those. Picture that rancid smell, but on a hot summer day. It's so thick you can almost feel it in the air. That's what the sweet tasted like. I almost spit it out onto the floor, but social niceties made me chew the thing and force it down my throat. The woman was talking all the time, but between the taste and her quiet voice, I barely heard her. My mouth tasted like rotten meat, so I politely told her I was going to get some water and ran into the kitchen. When I came back, she was gone. I'd been in the kitchen for less than 30 seconds. My first reaction probably should have been to assume that she went to the bathroom or had to leave in a hurry. Instead, I searched the entire house. I went through every single room, convinced I was going to open a closet or look under a bed and see her stuffed in there, grinning at me. That didn't happen, obviously, but I was still extremely on edge as the sun started to go down. I felt like I was turning off the light in my bedroom after spotting a giant spider in there. That night, I propped the chair against my bedroom door because I just could not shake the feeling that the woman was still in the house somewhere, hiding. I woke up at around 2 in the morning and heard creaking floorboards downstairs. It was an old house and unfamiliar. I kept telling myself this until the noises stopped. When I woke up the next morning, there was a red sweet on the living room table. I'll tell you the same thing I told the police. No, I could not be absolutely certain that the sweet wasn't there the day before. Maybe I just overlooked this. They told me that the organization the woman claimed to come from didn't actually exist, and clearly thought I was wasting their time. After they left, I searched the entire house again, and the grounds. Then I searched them again. By the time I was finished, I had managed to calm down a bit and look at the situation rationally. The woman probably left the suite there the previous day, and I just didn't notice. There was nowhere she could possibly be hiding. She was probably just some doddery old lady who wandered off while I was in the kitchen. As I prepared to go to bed, I had managed to fully delude myself into thinking nothing strange was going on. I decided not to do anything childish like blocking my door because what was I afraid of? Even if she somehow was still inside the house somewhere, what was she going to do? At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up abruptly, knowing in the back of my mind that something was wrong. I guess I must have heard something in my sleep. I turned over onto my side and reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, groping around because I was in an unfamiliar room. When the light came on, I saw the old woman standing right next to my bed. I only got a glimpse of her, because as soon as I screamed, she scuttled backwards out of the door really fast. I only got the briefest glimpse of her before she vanished into the unlit hallway outside my door. I jumped out of bed and slammed the door shut, then shoved the chair up against the handle. Then I dashed for my phone. No signal, no internet. I later found out that there was nothing wrong with the phone or local service. I think she was interfering with it somehow. The drop from the bedroom window wasn't too high. If I landed just right, I would probably avoid injury. But what if I sprained an ankle or broke my leg? I had a sudden vision of pulling myself across the dark garden while the woman sprinted after me and decided I didn't want to risk it. That gave me two options. Wait out the night in my bedroom or try to get out of the house now. I went for the second one. I had an idea that my flimsy barricade would not hold if the woman decided it wanted back in. I broke one of the chair legs off and crept slowly into the hallway, reaching carefully for the light switch. When I pressed it, the light came on for a second, then faded out. I flicked the switch a few more times. Nothing. Some gut instinct told me that she was sabotaging them somehow. I used my phone for light as I slowly and quietly crept along the upstairs hallway and down the stairs. The light barely traced the shapes of the walls in the dark, yawning frames of open doorways. I jumped at every single shadow and unidentifiable shape, certain that any second that grinning face would appear out of the shadows. I got down the stairs and to the front door. I double locked it and put the chain in place. Just as I was reaching for the first lock, I heard rapid, uneven footsteps at the top of the stairs, approaching swiftly. I undid the first lock. A high-pitched shriek came from halfway down the stairs, and I screamed as I undid the second lock and wrenched the door open. It stuck fast. I forgot the chain. I glanced behind me and saw the tall, spindly shape of the woman half running, half falling down the stairs towards me, her head lolling backward and her mouth hanging open. I can't even remember getting the chain off. I might have actually just yanked the door open so hard that I broke it. In any case, the last I saw of the woman was her face, inches away from me, as I slammed the door shut. I sprinted to the nearest house and eventually they called the police, possibly because I was half delirious with fear and babbling incoherently. The police once again failed to find anything unusual. It's been a week. I'm staying at a friend's house, sleeping with the lights on and the bedroom door barricaded. The house's real owners aren't back yet. I'm not sure what I'm going to tell them, but I have to stop them from going back there somehow. This is not a haunting, it's an infestation. I can't stop thinking about all of the holes in our defences, the windows and doors left open, the strangers invited into our living rooms. I just hope to God it's the house she wanted, and not me. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment, when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open, wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he could dance any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smiles still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He did not move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing, to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he was a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I would like to say at this point that I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.